What happened in the end? I give you my word.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to start this second and last day of Roundtables for Jazz Connective last event. I would like to thank again Celestine's Theatre to welcome us for this today, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm Alice. I'm in charge of social inclusion at Periscope since 5 years, and I'm essentially working with people who want to have an easy access to culture and to our venue. Like all our almost French people who have spoken since yesterday, I also apologize in advance for my bad English. As Adrien Chiquet said yesterday morning to introduce the first roundtable, indeed, French people are very not comfortable speaking English. Anyway, we are here today to talk about how music takes place in our society and the link between citizens and communities, musical projects that we can call social inclusion projects. We are welcoming 5 participants today, and it's an exclusive feminine roundtable. I thought it was important to point it out because we are talking a lot about parity these days, and especially in Periscope's team, and to prepare this roundtable. So here we are with all these women involved with Citizens Project. So we will have a French perspective focus first about cultural diversity and example of projects with various territories. First with Clotilde Charton, in charge of culture and social inclusion at Grand Lyon Métropole, who will introduce with her public policy point of view. Sarah Beaumont, in charge of public and social inclusion at Celestin Theatre. Then we will have a more English and Irish perspective with communities consideration. And for that, we will listen and discuss virtually, unfortunately, with Maui Wakelem Sloan, jazz program manager at Town Symphony Hall in Birmingham, Pauline Ledivnac, project manager at Vortex Jazz Club in London, and finally, Aislinn O'Gorman, creative arts manager at the ARC, a cultural center for children in Dublin. Hello. Clotilde, I let you start if it's okay for you.
Thank you, Alice, for this invitation, and thank you also for this organization. So I will speak about Lyon Metropole policies on the subject, and I will focus on 2 programs we have to promote social inclusion. But before that, I will just present you what is Lyon Metropole. If you can. Yes. Perfect. So Lyon Metropole is a local authorities composed of 59 cities, and you can see Lyon in the center with the dark red in the middle. And Lyon's population represents more than a third of the whole territory. As you can see, its public policies are very wide, ranging from economic and urban development, transport, environment, international affairs, to education, culture, and solidarity issues, such as family, childhood, professional integration. Its cultural interventions aims at being a lever for every strong public policy. Lyon Metropole supports major cultural events and structures, such as the Biennale of Art and Dance, European Heritage Day, the Musée des Confluences, Look de Nou Museum, arts festival, libraries, but also the Opera House of Lyon and theaters. Lyon Metropole encourages culture as a tool to develop territory. It means inter-cities partnership. And culture as an economic sector. It's more that we encourage cultural entrepreneurship. And then education through the arts, because we support 55 schools of music and art on the territory, and social inclusion, of which I'm in charge. Its budget is of about 40 million with the Invest program. and the major parts of its budget support the principal cultural establishment and events. It means that we don't have many funds rest to do other things. And access to culture as a lever for combating social and territorial inequalities is a strong focus of the newly elected representative roadmap, which will lead to develop interventions in this field. So, we have two main cultural programs to respond to social needs of population, and they are responding to policies of solidarity and their strategic frameworks. Among them, we have what we see on the right, a call for projects, about which I will talk later, which aims at developing participatory projects. And we have what we see on the left, a territorial strategy, which is called a strategy of cultural cooperation, with two levels. The first level is what we see here on the left side. It's a declaration for cultural cooperation, which is a unique strategy to articulate cultural development and cities development, and it was first initiated by the city of Lyon in 2004. It consists of a charter, so a document, signed together with other local authorities, so Lyon Métropole, the state, and 21 cities, including Lyon, which are committed to mobilizing their cultural public services to contribute to the city's cultural development. It is related to a national specific urban policy. It's a very specific policy in France, which is dedicated to disenfranchised neighborhoods, and Lyon Métropole leads the network. So this is the first level, the level of local authorities. And then we will see the second level. Thank you. The second level is the one of the equipment. So each stakeholders of the former declaration sign also a charter with its own institutions on its territory. Often it's a library, a school of music, a theater, or a movie. Every 20 cities, apart from Lyon and Villeurbanne, which are bigger, have those kind of institutions on their territory. And these institutions will write engagements and commitments to develop specific actions on their territories out of their own funds. They won't receive any more funds to do that. And they have to co-elaborate with local partners, such as the city services, artistic, social, educative, health structures, and so on. And they have to share cultural orientations to do their actions. So you can see on the map on the right side the neighborhoods who are concerned by this cooperation, the blue and yellow fleck you can see on the map. And in gray, it's all the cities where they are located and which are the signatories of the declaration. As example, I put you the Convention métropolitaine. Thank you. The Convention métropolitaine, and it concerns the 8 metropolitan cultural event and institutions, which have been taking 72 commitments to build projects on chosen territories. For example, Veduta, which is the territorial aspect of the Biennale of Contemporary Arts, developed a collaborative program involving inhabitants who choose artworks from the Museum of Contemporary Arts to set up an exhibition in a local cultural institutions. And we have other examples like this, and Sarah and Alice will illustrate this kind of strategy in Lyon policy. The second program is a call for projects entitled Culture and Solidarities. And you can see its criteria on the right side. First, the type of audience which is involved. So it's always a specific audience, physically, socially, geographically disadvantaged, and remote from artistic and cultural life offered by the institutions. That is, people who won't attend a show or visit a museum or go to a movie spontaneously. The project should encourage contacts between different audiences and promote territorial, social, gender, and age diversity. And then we can see the type of projects that are encouraged. They are based on a collaborative process with participants active in its design and realization. It implies social structures engaged in the project, such as social centers, community centers, accommodations for dependent elderly people, group homes or welfare associations. And it could also imply collaborations with cultural events and structure. The project should include regular activities with the participants, a process assessment, and a public diffusion, like a performance, an exhibition, or a film, to promote the achievements of the project. In practical terms, you can see that the grant can be between 5,000 to 10,000 euros, and it can be over 50% of the total project's costs, which it means that the applicants have to find other funds to do their projects. And we have other calls of projects in France which can be complementary, such as the one of the Ministry of Culture about cultural actions in territories, or another one related to urban policies. And we have also a call of projects in the region, which is called Culture and Health, which encourage cultural projects in hospitals or dependent people accommodation. If we can see the result, we can support about 30 projects per year in this program. And they are all from artistic disciplines, often multidisciplinary. They are taking place on different territories of the maps you saw on the slide, on the previous slide. They are long-term programs, mostly, going from 4 months up to a year or more. So I put some examples of those programs and with projects that have been done in 2019 or this year. They have all in common that they are work-in-progress projects. That it means that the artists propose a frame, and they don't know what it will, where it will lead to, and it implies different stages. The first step is a mutual confidence between partners and with the participants, which takes time. Then training together and also socializing, because it's very important that they could have fun together in order to have pleasure in this project. And then the third part is the collective creation between artists and participants that will give way to a public performance. So here you can see the first one on the left is an intergenerational project that was held in the city of Rieux-la-Pape with sharing life stories about living, and it was made out of workshops of writing, music, theater, and photography. And they did also a video. The one on the right side is Danse des différences. It's a film made with young people from 4 different cities, one with disabilities and other young living in underprivileged neighborhoods, and they form duo of speakers and dancers to speak about difference in this video. So here we see a workshop, and then on the bottom on the left, l'ALCA Hospitalité is project is an artistic action research about cities' life stories and the making of the city, made with collecting and testimonies of homeless people throughout Lyon Métropole. And the last one is a theater project, which implied Iraq refugees, African young minors, and local people for a poetic show with music and poetry last year on the stage. So we also have projects involving more music as a main discipline, but they are still ongoing, so I couldn't illustrate them. The most common effect we can see on the participants assessed by the leaders and partners of these projects are a gain in self-esteem, a breakdown to psychological and social barriers, a better knowledge of the neighborhoods of the city, of the structures in the city, and a gain in mobility within. Also, they are all interested more and more in art, and they allow themselves to cultural life more, which is also very important. And more generally, there is a change of image of the participants and partners and of the audience about them. To conclude, I will just say that both programs aim at promoting artistic projects not conceived for people but with and by them. Their goals are to encourage projects who pay a better attention to each one's needs and recognize one's skills and abilities, who make one active in a process and contributing to a shared experience, and to help empowerment and promote citizens' participation and expression, and to make it visible. If art and culture give us a representation of the world, this is a democratic issue that different views and voices could be seen and heard, to reflect and to promote social diversity. So now I will give Alice and Sarah will illustrate this kind of programs because they are part of it in Lyon and what they are doing in their own institutions. Thank you for your listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Clotilde, for your speech. Indeed, Sarah, maybe you can continue with a concrete project you lead here at Célestins.
Thank you, Alice. So to talk about the Célestin Théâtre de Lyon, first a few words of introduction. So I am Sarah. It's been a year and a half that I'm public relations at this theatre, and before I was in a municipal theatre in the suburb area of Lyon, so in the metropole, like Clotilde talked about. First, I want to say that you have to keep in mind that I'm working for a municipal organizations. We are very bounded with the city. In a few words, the Théâtre des Célestins is a late 19th century building, and it is what is called in French théâtre à l'italienne, with a very specific auditorium and several floors to welcome the audience. So we have a double interest when we welcome audience. Of course, the program with the shows, and also the building with its historical background and the patrimonial aspect. Just some data to give you an idea about the main activity, the shows, the program. We have around 300 representations normally in a normal season, not this year. It represents around 100,000 spectators each season and 10,000 visitors of the building. And there is, as Clotilde said about the metropole, there is a real interest for diversity. So we work with a goal, and each night, each show, it's very important that there is diversity in the audience. So around 30% of the audience is less than 28 years old, and thank you. And 20% of the audience coming is part of a school project, so middle school, high school, university. In the public relations service, we are 4. There is the head of the service, one person specifically for the guided tours, because it's a real activity for us. And when we welcome groups, when we can, we offer them to do a tour of the theater, and also a public relation manager for schools, university, and one for adults, including companies, work councils, social integration, and people with disabilities. So to talk about a little about the charte de coopération culturelle of Lyon. The first one that was in this area before the Déclaration de coopération culturelle of the metropole. It's, like Clotilde say, a charter with specifications to respect. Some areas in Lyon are defined as priority zones, we can say, because of the difficulties the population met. It can be work difficulties, educational difficulties, social insertion, family issues, and this population is often far from going in cultural places. So the goal is to open the gates to everyone, as we said. And as I said before, as a matter of fact, the diversity is very important each evening in the auditorium. So in this charter, each municipal organization and also other organization has to commit to managing a project towards this population. And we have no other funds than the one we have, but it's really a commitment. And it existed before the charter, of course, but now it's really like a contract, and it's part of our missions. For example, a concrete example, as we are a municipal theatre, our competence is bounded with the one of the city, and the city has a competence in the educational field, in artistic actions. So we are bounded to work with schools, and schools in priorities area, for example. So each year, the idea is to develop a project with schools, some in a priority area. We have, for example, a school we work with in the 8th district of Lyon, and some also in district areas that are under observation, that are not really pointed out as priority areas, but with population that can be also in difficulties. And these schools are in the 2nd district of Lyon, the area of the Periscope. So we focus on some districts that that are pointed out in the charter, and it is quite a moral contract. Of course, we are a theatre of Lyon, so we reach all the populations, and as a big institutions. We reach also some schools and population that are not in the city, but also, for example, in the academy at the educational level. To reach the audience, it's important to say that schools are a very good way because we reach the children, and we have to keep in mind that it's also our future. If we educate the children, if we give them the envy to go to these places, we will have audience. It will be easier to reach them in the future. And also, by the children, we reach also the parents. In this project, most of the children we work with have never been to a theater. And so each season, we think about a kind of journey to dive them into the cultural field. So, thank you. To take an example, let's go back to the season 2019-2020. In the program, we had a partnership with Lyon BD Festival, which is a festival about comic books. And this partnership was in December. It includes an exhibition about girl heroes in comic books and a show adapted from a comic book for children with an actress, an actor, and musicians. The journey was composed as following. So first, we've made a guided tour with 3 classes. Of a guided tour of the theater, and we watched the exhibition. Then the 3 classes came to see the show, including as possible with the parents and with other schools. Always in mind that we are in a sorry, we pointed the diversity in the audience. Then the classes met the actress and musician, so they can talk, they can share their experience. And we also organized some workshops, to learn the basic skill of drawing your own comic book character. So it was a complete journey with participation, with a show, with a historical background, and with this global approach of the action, we tried to break the cliches and the bias that can exist about culture, but also about areas, about places, because some of the children often don't leave their neighborhood and don't go to other places that they think they're not for them. So the theater is at the very center of the city, and it's not always around the corner for an inhabitant of Lyon when he's in the peripheral district or areas. And just a few words about the other approach we can have with the audience, because these are projects we lead with the educational field of the city, but there are also projects we worked on with representatives, mostly with audience striking with difficulties, and mostly adults. It always includes a guided tour also, because we think it's a very easy way to begin the cultural approach. And there is also there is also coming for a show on evening representation. And when we can, we organize meetings with artistic companies or workshops. But this is not the same approach. Mostly it's job-oriented. We try to work some goals that are not educational or cultural, but meaningful to this audience. For instance, how to introduce oneself, how an actor can help you with your posture, well, your diction, how we can work to be less stressed, etc. We can substitute, of course, the representative, but we are a support and also an entertainment sometimes, because it's important to have this meaningful and joyful approach of the culture. And also these experiences are sharing experience that is part of, I think, citizenship. Each show conveys emotions. Each one can share and explain why it moves him or her, why he loves or not. And we in these workshops, we different communities are represented. For example, last week, we made a kind of conference call with a stage director and some adults that are that talked about their histories of migration, of exile. And there were some Spanish people, some Italian people, so the second generation of migration, also from Maghreb. And it was a very moving workshop, because we saw that even if their stories were not the same, they have a sharing experience, and it was very first step to go, we hope, for the show next year. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Sarah. As we said a lot in the beginning of this roundtable in France, we especially are talking about territories and the way it's divided into districts, who generally imply to get public grants to do specific projects with citizens. Indeed, we are talking about some priority areas, and there is a real geographical structuration of these areas. Here in Periscope, we lead about 5 to 10 long-term projects with different groups per year, very close in the very close area of our venue, especially to use it as a support. We try to do the link between musicians who we are seeing playing and producing music at Periscope with structural partners in the field of education, social, health, integration, etc. I will talk about 2 examples for Periscopes. First, we've worked a lot in a suburb of Lyon, in a priority area, in the city of Vaux-en-Velin, on a priority area called Mas du Taureau. Here with special public grants, because the area is considered by public policies as showing sufficient precariousness, violence, trafficking, to justify the need to conduct cultural projects with and by citizens. So 2 musicians and 1 technician worked during 2.5 years in this neighborhood to create an immersive headphone tour of the area with residents' records and live testimonies. It was clearly a project linked with different communities, but we can't define this project like that in France, so we talk about a territorial project who implied cultural diversities. The second part is the way in which the Periscope tries to shine on its neighborhood. Periscope venue is based in the center of Lyon, near a railway station. A couple years ago, a public policy study was conducted and revealed some of the area realities, like in Madutoro, precariousness, young people who drop out of school, arrival of migrants, prostitution, trafficking, unemployment, etc. All these realities and populations exist side by side with some of the richest population in Lyon. So it's the big difference with Vent-Velin. And every day we are working with different partners to meet this population and group of people. So we are in close collaboration with the social partner, the schools, foster homes, prevention, and then thus we can carry out projects with street educators or school dropouts, but also with newcomers to France in primary skills training, like French as a foreign language. We call that in France like FLE. Most of these projects involve musical creation, regular meetings over a rather long period of time, a couple of months to a couple of years. As a more concrete example, and to make the link with the grant that Clotilde talked earlier, cultures and solidarities. We are actually carrying out a musical project in the mother-child foster home near our venue. So 2 musicians regularly meet mothers and children to create some music together with songs, with some daily noises and natural noises. And the name of the project is Musical Dreams, like Rêverie Sonore, because it's a multitude of soft and relaxing sounds. And in this poster, we could talk about community or communities, but once again, here it's about really cultural diversity and how all this culture mixed together and can conduct to a musical creation. Actually, with all these projects, we want to reveal a real territory knowledge and musical cartography of the area, who represent a massive cultural diversities. Well, I think I draw the map, and I think with all 3 of us we draw a French map. So maybe Marie, you can link with a project you lead in Town and Symphony Hall in Birmingham.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Wonderful. So have you got my PowerPoint presentation? Can that go up? Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. So Birmingham is similar to Lyon in population of about 1 million people. We are the youngest city in Europe with about 40% of the population under 25. So there's a lot of opportunity there. This first slide just shows the summer school that we put on. And then the second slide here is a kind of collage of many projects that we put on. I'll just get up my other computer, which has some further notes on that. As you can see, we do a range of projects in Birmingham. We are lucky to be based in Symphony Hall, which is an iconic concert venue in the city, one of the best concert halls for acoustics in the world, I think. And so we're very lucky to use that and enable that for our young people. We put on various ensembles, primarily for children 11 to 19. And then we have an additional program of work that is for emerging artists and established artists. So the way I think it works is we have a summer school, which takes place in August every year. Obviously this year it hasn't, but we are really hoping that next year we can do that. That summer school is really a taster of learning how to improvise. It's for, we have beginner, intermediate and advanced groups. It's free to access, which is very important to us. We are funded by various funds, Arts Council, PRSF, Ronnie Scott's Foundation, to ensure that that provision is free to everyone. And we work closely with the music service as well. So we have the summer school that then feeds into the jazz lines ensembles, which are also free, and they are every week for a couple of hours on a Saturday, based in Symphony Hall, because we have various breakout rooms that we can use for the young people. They are in 3 groups: beginner, intermediate and advanced, and those are learning the jazz canon, learning composition, improvisation, how to work as a rhythm section, many different aspects of the music. And alongside that, instrumental ensembles, we also have a newly created gospel group, which has been going for about a year or so, working with key figures within the gospel scene in Birmingham, because that scene is vibrant and it is, although linked to jazz and many musicians work in, a crossover, it is a specific community of musicians which are, we really want to make sure we build that relationship with. And I think part of that is enabling, obviously, the experts in those fields to work in the way that they need to enable more young people to get access to that music, perhaps outside of the church settings that generally that it is fostered. So we do a gospel ensemble, which is really eye-opening in terms of the talent that comes out of that. So that's a real it's really exciting for us to be doing that. We also have a vocal ensemble as well, and then beyond instrumental ensembles. And then from that ensemble, every week we then engage with those children, give them work with them to see what they need, and we have a future fellows scheme which is a link to that. So particular individuals that we talk to them and see what they need. We then provide one-to-one lessons on specific instruments or specific like music tech perhaps, or whatever kind of aspects of music they would like support on. And then we also offer Masterclass Program, which is the next slide. So these various slides we've had international musicians and British musicians and local to do various masterclasses with our young people. We try and set out the curriculum of these ensembles, working towards projects. We commission local musicians to do to write music for them and arrange music. But then when we have the concert program that we also program alongside the talent development program at Town Hall Symphony Hall, we make sure there's access to those concerts too, and also a genuine kind of investment in the masterclass program and offering to those young people. All of this is free to access, because we want to make sure that there's this provision across the board for anyone, which with vocal as well as gospel and instrumental, hopefully that opens up opportunities for various musicians coming from different areas. We would love to do early years work too, but currently it does fit in with the framework of 11 to 19, and then an emerging artist, an established artist program beyond that. Beyond the future fellows, we also have peer mentors that work with our ensembles to kind of train them up as to be educators and music educators too. We do that in a structured way in the summer school, and then we also do it with our ensembles weekly. And then we have support and lead tutors, which often have come from the conservatoire, which we work closely with in Birmingham, and it gives them regular work. They hone their skills working with the more experienced music directors, and we hope to create this ecology of building a sustainable workforce in Birmingham and beyond as well. But there's a thriving scene in the free jazz, in gospel, in contemporary jazz, and all those linked genres that we hope to be helping via our privilege of being in Symphony Hall and Town Hall to enable a strong workforce and a kind of strong jazz ecology within the city. We then have the Jazz Lines Commission. What's the next slide? Yes, I'll talk about the commission shortly. This is important. This is the Birmingham Music Education Partnership, of which Jazz Lines sits on as part of Town Hall Symphony Hall. It is led by the Music Service, and we're one of the biggest music hubs because we're a large city, and the Music Hub, which is the Birmingham Music Education Partnership, works with these various arts organisations, music organisations within the city, varied genres, to come together and try and do crossover projects to make sure that we are delivering the best and kind of significant impact with music education in the city. The music service deliver music provision to about 80,000 children a week, I think, when it's not COVID and when they're able to get into schools. We then do cross projects with them. We work with them on a flagship project called Generation Ladywood, which is specifically targeted for the area of which Symphony Hall is in. The locality is Ladywood, which is a area of high deprivation, and we work with schools within that area on a jazz composition project, of which we commission outstanding educator and jazz musician. We've done that about 7 years now, and they work with the children on this commission. They have a kind of introduction to improvisation and work as a kind of massed ensemble, and then that comes into celebrated in a big concert at Symphony Hall, normally in June, of which there are about 300 children participating together, which is amazing to see. And then we hope, and we have some success in this, in then working with those children beyond that, encouraging them to come to the ensembles weekly. There's a prize fund for the certain children that get nominated by their teachers to then have free instruments. It's a kind of step towards really working together with schools, offering an alternative to curriculum music outside of school, and also introducing some of these children to the building, Symphony Hall, which is right on their doorstep, which otherwise perhaps they would not visit. So the work we do with Birmingham Music Education Partnership is key, and we're really pleased to be involved with all these different organisations, because we do need that link. And I think it's our civic responsibility, especially because we're a big organisation, we have access to these big venues, to ensure that we are providing for those communities that are on our doorstep in Birmingham. Should we move to the next slide? So this is the Generation Ladywood. This is Symphony Hall. For those of you who've not visited it or been there, this is one of the commissions. That was Sid Peacock quite a few years ago now. So that was all the children performing. And the other picture is a conference that me and jazz producer Richard Furr, who's an excellent musician and educator, leads on the talent development project management. And we were at a conference with primary and secondary school teachers, trying to engage with them, and that's really important, as others have said, to get out into schools to spread those opportunities for the young people. Should we move to the next slide? Alongside the work with young people, Jazzline specifically are involved in community work. One of the long-standing partnerships we've had is with a wonderful community big band, which is cross-generational, called the Notebenders Big Band. They rehearse in Ladywood, which is in a area of Birmingham where Symphony Hall is, as I've mentioned. And they're a wonderful big bunch of people, all ages, that rehearse together and then come together on a monthly performance on the foyer. Now, we also provide various masterclass opportunities with them as well, and performance opportunities. It's really important for us to work with these people. The legacy of the Notebenders Big Band is formed through Andy Hamilton, a wonderful Caribbean musician that then moved to England and had some success, and it's a very strong community link there, and we're really keen on continuing that. So that is important to us as well, for Jazzlines to work with various community groups as well. And often, as all of you have probably experienced as well, these interactions with different groups then encourage a kind of cross-fertilization of various young people and musicians of any age that want to get involved. So the monthly session, that's a performance of the Notebenders at Symphony Hall, attracts a large audience, or normally about 400 people when it's on. And young people playing, some of our young people that have worked with our ensembles, playing the Note Benders Big Band, and then that cross-fertilisation of experiences for different people within different communities, you can really see happening in kind of real time, which is wonderful. So that's a strong commitment that we have with Jazzlines to continue to work with those adults and young people within that big band and offer support performances at town halls, symphony hall and festivals when they arise. There's also a wonderful community jazz festival called Birchfield Jazz Festival. Birchfield is within an area of Birmingham, also is not it is an underprivileged area and has a very wide mix in terms of diversity. There's a fantastic jazz festival there that a guy called Lecken programs, who's a wonderful international jazz musician, and we every year program an emerging artist, often that's come through our schemes of work or various partners that to then perhaps provide a platform for a kind of professional gig that's within the community. It's in a church usually, and it's a wonderful mix of music. So we work with Lecken on that, and we also work with him on other kind of concert series. But those sort of small interactions as such then often develop into further opportunities. So we're really keen on, as our position within Symphony Hall and as Jazzlines, we can get out to those different venues as well, grassroots and the iconic venues. We're keen on making sure that we offer the best opportunities for those communities that are within Birmingham to interact with jazz. Should we do the next slide? Is there another one? Maybe that's it. That might be the video now, actually. So there we go. So I whizzed through that, I think, because I wanted to demonstrate all the different work that we do, but not in a kind of succinct way. I think I sent a video to Alice, which explains our summer school and perhaps gives some insight from the actual creators of the music, because our family of Jazzlines and the musical directors and artists that we work with are really important to us, and they all feed into our concert program, our talent development program, and the actual scene that we are part of in Birmingham, which obviously has lots of intertwining links, and it's important to, as kind of programmers and producers, understand those links and celebrate them. So I think I'd like to finish with this, if you can play that. And thank you very much. I've been really interesting to listen to other people. I'm looking forward to the discussion shortly. Thank you.
Seeing some of the leading educators in the country really deliver amazing workshops, and being part of that and helping with the delivery and kind of witnessing how it goes down from the other side. We've always been subject to these amazing sessions but never really know how they work.
It's always good to get a close proximity to jazz players, like real live jazz players who are gigging. I know for myself, growing up and trying to see what it is to play jazz, the more like interaction I could have with actual musicians that were on the road gigging. And that was in some way as important as the kind of constant technical lessons that you might get along the way.
Just having a very broad and relaxed atmosphere within the workshop, so people of different levels are sort of comfortable to have a go at everything, really.
A really important part as to the uniqueness of the summer school is the fact that there's no audition requirements at all. We get a whole spectrum of abilities right from beginners. Some students, they only know one or two notes, and then that's what we work with all the way through to some students who go to regular conservatoire Saturday schools.
We work a lot with singing, so we get a lot of the inner ear being developed. We work without any music, so it means it gives us a lot of freedom as well. It's a leveller, it means that people don't have to have reading skills.
Jonathan Silk and John Fleming and they kind of signposted me towards Jazz Lines as well as Stu Barker, because I went to see him at a gig and he's like, oh, you should go and check out Jazz Lines. So I was 11 at the time, and that was when I did my first summer school.
It's about developing the ear, it's about communicating with everyone else, learning together. It's a really organic way of operating.
Basically, we just want people to have fun with music and learn about being able to be free and being able to improvise, which is really important.
Mary, maybe Pauline, you can complete this community views with your expertise from London and also from France, and do the link between your both expertise.
Yeah, expertise, I don't know, I'll see. But bonjour à toutes, hello everyone. Yeah, I'm kind of a French undercovered in London. I moved to London 5 years ago, and as you said, Alice, I'm currently working as a project manager for the Vortex Jazz Club in Dalston, which is located in Hackney, East London. And I'm mostly involved into marketing, promotion, and a bit of production as well. But prior to that, I was working for music studios, also based in Dalston, and a production company. So I got the opportunity to be involved in the production of quite a few free public events over the past 5 years. But before my time in London, I was also working in France, as you say, in cultural programming. So it is interesting to experience the different approach basically between the two countries. What I've noticed first when I arrived to London from Paris, and I know it's difficult to compare because of the size of the two cities, but what I found in London is that the borough of London all have like a really strong identity, and there's a lot of diversity between the boroughs, and also loads and many cultural initiatives and activities that are initiated at local level from the borough. And a recent initiative from the Mayor of London kind of illustrate this well is it's something called the Borough of Culture, which is kind of a new program, a new award, which is basically awarded to a specific borough each year. And it goes with over £1 million budget to basically celebrate the cultural activities and the local talent in the borough, but also reflect on a longer term strategy for the borough and the cultural activities in it. The other difference I've seen is, I'd say, in terms of audience and public engagement. When I used to work in France, and maybe this has changed a bit because it was 5 years ago, but when I was working in France, the objective, the aim was always to target the widest audience possible and be, as accessible and inclusive as possible. And what I've noticed arriving in England is, especially when you're applying for public funding, you can get into really specific details and criteria about the audience that you want to target. So most funding bodies will ask you to precise what your audience is in terms of age group, genre, sexual orientation, ethnic background. And I think in a way it allows you to also set specific targets for the project that you want to lead inside your organization. I also wanted to specify that I think the word communities can be understood in many different ways. It can be said as a territorial approach. So I would say, for instance, like we've got a community in a borough in Hackney, for instance, is a community. Can also be linked to a shared experience or a shared history, like, for instance, the influence of immigration in a specific area, but can also be linked to affinity. So for me, musicians, for instance, are also a community here in London. So I'm going to talk a bit about my own experience at the Vortex. So just a quick word about the Vortex. The Vortex Jazz Club is one of the leading jazz clubs in the UK. We've been very honored to receive the Jazz FM Awards Venue of the Year a few weeks back. And the Vortex itself is a community organization. It's a non-for-profit, it's a volunteer-led. We have a fantastic community of volunteers helping out with the daily running of the club, and working on the helping out with, like, running the bar, welcoming the audience, and we couldn't really survive without them. So that's something really, really important. And so the Vortex is located in Dalston, in the Borough of Hackney, East London. And Hackney is a really diverse area, not only in terms of ethnic background or racial diversity, but also in terms of socioeconomic background. So it's important for the Vortex when it comes to reaching out to the community to try to reach all part of this local community. And I could probably sum up our action with like three main strategies, if I can call them that way. So the first one is, of course, to be as accessible as possible. So this goes with being accessible for our live performances, with like keeping price of tickets accessible. It's really important. But I would say also being accessible in terms of use of the space, make the most of our space, and for the space to be open for the local community. So over the past few years, we've really emphasized the use of the space in the daytime, for instance, making it available for musicians to rehearse, to record, for local organization to use it for workshops, so public meetings, and that's, I think, something that's important inside the local Hackney community. The second one, and which is more linked towards reaching out to a wider audience, are our partnerships. So we work with loads of different organizations based in Hackney or neighboring area in London, to try to reach out to more diverse audience. So I could name a few. We've got, for instance, a partnership with an organization, Joyful Noise, like music producers, and they present contemporary world Black music. We also have a partnership with the Royal Academy of Music, which every year has their final year exam at the Vortex in public. So it's free for the public to attend the final performances for the students in their final year at the Royal Academy. And recently we also had a new organization on board, which is called Girl Play Jazz, which is supporting young girls and women jazz practice. And the last strategy, I'd say, is related to funding application and getting specific funding to reach specific objectives. So before my time at the Vortex, I know we had like a specific program in place with funding to help us out reach specific objectives in terms of programming. So it can be, for instance, emphasize programming musicians outside of London, or musicians under 30 years old, or musicians coming from a non-white background. So that's funding that help us get to achieve more diversity into our own programming. And there's also the commissioning work that's important, which is like applying for funding to give artists opportunities for creation and for performing. So we've recently worked with a composer named Renelle Shaw, who did a fantastic job and created two pieces, one in relation to the Windrush Day celebration, and the second one in relation with Black History Month. So yeah, all these kinds of initiatives and elements are what we do to try to be as accessible and reach the wider audience possible at our local level. I would also like to mention that the Vortex is based in Dalston and is based on a public space called Gillette Square. And the Vortex is one of the two organizations that held a license for organizing public events on the square. So it's also an important role for us at the Vortex to kind of supervise or facilitate the organization of community-led events outside on the square. And over the past year, we had like many examples. I think, for instance, about we had like a yearly celebration of Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie. There's been Jamaica Independence Day celebration, and many more. And to wrap up and to conclude briefly, or like at least open a bit of the discussion we're going to have later on, I think like community-led event and a community-centered approach can be a tool to help us reach cultural diversity. And I think loads of organizations nowadays are aware and conscious that cultural diversity is really important in terms of programming. But I think it's important as well to keep in mind that behind the scene, the diversity is important as well. So among curators, among programmers, among producers, we need more diversity. And having this community-led event is, I think, a good step to engage with a more diverse range of people. And it's the first step, basically, because it's easier for people to get involved with something they know, with something they love, and with something they want to fight for. And I think it's a good tool and a good way of going towards more cultural diversity that way.
Thank you, Pauline. Maybe Aisling, you can talk about the arc and opening the discussion for just later on.
Sure. Thank you very much, Alice. And thanks. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? There I am. Thanks, Alice, and thanks for inviting me to be part of today. And it's been very interesting to hear everyone else's experiences, and lovely to meet you all as well. So I'm Aisling O'Gorman, and I'm the Creative Arts Manager at the ARC in Dublin in Ireland. We are somewhat of an unusual organisation because we only work for audiences of children. That is our remit. The age range we work for is between the ages of 2 and 12. So it's basically, well, it would be preschool and primary school age children here in Ireland. So we have a very particular, I suppose, mission in terms of our audience. Because we work solely with children, in a way, by definition, our work is naturally inclusive, you could say. And certainly we aim for it to be, but you know, there's still, you can never just assume that you're doing that. You have to keep very consciously working on who exactly you're engaging with, even if they're all children, and to try and make sure that you are reaching as many children as possible from all kinds of backgrounds. So I have a couple of slides. Were they possible to get ready, Alice? Is that, yeah, so just some photographs to share. Thank you very much. This is the front of the ARC. It's an old front, as you can see. It's an old listed building in the centre of Dublin, which was previously a Presbyterian meeting house. So in 1995, it was opened. It was basically, you'll see in a moment with the next photograph, the inside of it is all new. So all that's really left of the old building is the outside. There's the front lobby. And it was, the back end of it was demolished and rebuilt and designed especially for children, which was incredibly unusual at the time. And it won lots of awards. So as you can see, there's lots of exposed concrete, and the design aimed not to patronize children. The design of the building was really aimed to respect children, I suppose. And it also has aged pretty well. It hasn't really dated since the 90s, which is also good. On this slide, you can see a photograph of a jazz performance happening on our stage. So the building is quite small. It's very child focused in its dimensions, but it has a completely professionally kitted out auditorium theatre space, which you can see here. This is a performance with Lauren Kinsella and Shane Latimer and a cartoonist called Patrick Sanders. It was a show which the ARC commissioned and produced in partnership with Improvised Music Company, who I know are a partner with Jazz Connective. This one here is an outdoor performance. Our stage is unusual because it actually opens at the back onto an outdoor square called Meeting House Square, and we, from time to time, we do outdoor performances And then this is a band called Stomptown Brass, doing a big performance for families there. They started in this kind of street performance style, and then they actually moved onto the stage after a little while. So we were able to kind of mix up the presentation of their performance as part of that. So we do a lot of performance programming, and we commission a lot of work. Obviously, the commissioning is very particular because we're asking artists to make something that we think will really engage young audiences. So there's quite an involved process usually, working very collaboratively with the artists on the work that they create for those kinds of programs. But we also do, alongside performance programming, we also do a lot of more interactive participatory programming. So if you can move on to the next picture. So this is a music installation we presented last year. It actually comes from Belgium, from an organization called the Logos Foundation. These are all, they look like cushions, but they're actually instruments. So the children are having great fun there because they're attached by the pipes to, you can see one of them in the corner, these unusual wind instruments, and the cushions are actually full of air. So when you sit on them, it actually activates the instrument to play, and then you can manipulate how loud or soft or how quick or fast it plays by bouncing on the cushion, basically. So it's a really fun, interactive sort of musical experience. And if we move on to the next slide, I'll just show you another installation. This was one that we commissioned from an Irish artist called Jonathan Nangle, who's a composer and an electronic musician. So he took an old cello and he basically composed some music, which we recorded with the cellist, and then that was basically inserted, if you like, into the inside of the cello using an Arduino chip, and that was attached to the front of the cello, and wherever you can see the black paint, that was it's a special conductive paint. So when you touch the black parts of the cello, it triggers the sounds to be played. So effectively, you can play the cello without ever having to take a lesson in how to play the cello. And the sounds were quite unusual. They were, some of them were more, I suppose, straightforward cello recordings, and other parts of the composition were processed in different ways. So it was really kind of interesting for children to hear how a cello could make lots of different sounds, and they could also mix the sounds, so they could do a little bit of kind of spontaneous arranging to play the different sounds at different times and combine them in different ways. So installations are one part of what we do in terms of the participatory work, but we also run a huge amount of workshop programs, and that's a really big part of what we do, which are obviously by definition very interactive and involving children. Those are my contact details if anyone wanted to get in touch with me or to check out our website. We are a multidisciplinary organisation, so music is a really big part of what we do, but we also present theatre, dance and visual art. And from time to time we even dabble in science programmes. So the definition of culture for us is very, very broad. And that's quite useful sometimes in terms of engaging wider audiences. You know, you can find different art forms may just engage different people. So that can be quite a useful thing. And we also, of course, would combine art forms and look at those kind of options as well. So that's a very quick run through, I suppose, on what we do. In terms of our audiences, well, because we're working with children, we have obviously huge connections with schools. That's a massive part of our work, is engagement with schools, and then also parents. And then our third big community, I suppose, in that sense, is the artists as well, as Pauline and others have mentioned. That is a community in itself too, and nurturing that community of artists who want to work with children and take that work seriously is a really big and important part of our mission as well. But to talk first about schools, with teachers, there's an ongoing relationship building and then maintaining that relationship with schools and teachers, which is really, really important. We, in recent years, have set up a reasonably new program to have a particular engagement with schools in our immediate vicinity. Like a number of the other venues here on this panel, we are in the city centre. And so sometimes it's, you know, that sense of community with your local, the local people can be a little bit harder to achieve in our experience, perhaps, than if you're in like a suburb. which, you know, is a little bit maybe more defined in terms of that community identity, or there's just a stronger connection for one reason or another. So we have started a program with our schools in our immediate vicinity, most of which are designated disadvantaged. So there's a system here where schools which are located in areas of deprivation get this designation, and it means that they get extra support to help, I suppose, address the issues around that for the children and their education. So that's another reason why it's really important for us to be connected with those schools. So through this new program, we have had the opportunity really to develop long-term relationships with those schools, which has been really, really fruitful. So they attend various things in our building, because we also want, it's really important that they feel like our building is their building, you know, that it's not a place that's alien to them, that it's a place that they feel they can feel comfortable in, and that it's their space really. And yeah, so we engage with those schools at least 3 or 4 times a year, and we also present programs for teachers, continuing professional development programs for teachers in the arts. So we try to engage the teachers from those schools in the CPD programs also. So we're creating a sort of year-round connect with the schools and with the teachers. And that has proved to be very fruitful, especially this year actually in terms of COVID, because we've been able to rely on those relationships and actually still create quite a lot of online work particularly with those schools, which has actually gone surprisingly well despite all the challenges that we've all been dealing with. So the other, obviously, a big part of our audience will be parents. And we have a policy, because the children we're working with are so young, that up to the age of 6, parents have to attend with their children to public events. So in that way, we really want to nurture that relationship with the parents as well. So from a young age with their children, that they get to have that lovely experience with their child and to have the joy and the creativity alongside their child. So that's a really important part of our programming, especially for the under 6s. And parents also attend with all our shows, no matter if children are a little bit older. But when children are over 6 for workshops, we don't necessarily require the parent to stay, because the children usually are a little bit more independent, and it perhaps is more comfortable for the child at that stage to have an experience with other children. So in terms of how we, I suppose, try and create a dialogue and a communication with our various audiences. Well, I mean, mainly our audiences are children. So, but very often, obviously, it's the teacher or the parent who is the person who decides whether or not a child is going to engage with something that we're doing. So we have obviously a lot of dialogue with the teachers involved in our Access program. And we also have set up a teachers advisory group. So it's a way for us to be able to share our ideas and our thinking around how we're going to engage with children through schools, and to bounce that off teachers who are working directly in those contexts, and to get their point of view. So we view that as a kind of an ongoing dialogue, so that we can continue to learn and be, you know, they will keep us informed as well around things that might be happening around school policy, or things that we may or may not be as aware of, which is really, really helpful. We can present programming ideas to them and talk through how that might work from a teacher's point of view, and figure things out with them, which is really, really helpful. And likewise, we do a similar thing with children directly. So in the last 4 years, we formalized a kind of dialogue process with children. So we created a Children's Council, which is 30 to 35 children, and they are aged between 10 and 11 usually, mainly because at that stage it's possible to have quite a good dialogue with children at that age. We have an artist who's engaged to sort of lead the Children's Council, and they meet once a month. Normally that would happen in the Arc, but these days it's happening online. Eventually we will be back in the building. But So what that means is, well, basically those children get a chance to experience our program and tell us what they think about it in very short terms. So we want to know what they think, but we also want them to, to get lots of experience of what we do. So to try, go to shows, experience workshops, meet artists and talk to them. And and basically get a real sense of what we do, so that we can have really meaningful conversations about that. So as a programmer, I would meet with the council periodically and talk to them about the things that we're planning to do and ask for their feedback. I might show examples of things, artists that I'm looking at, or workshop programs that we've done in the past, and ask them what do they think, and whilst they can start off being kind of shy, usually by May, June every year, they've really found their voice, and they're quite comfortable to express their opinions to us, and it's been a really useful process. The ARC has always done this type of thing, but it has really formalised in the last number of years, this dialogue with children. That's been extremely helpful for us. And it may be a model that, can be useful even, we don't work with adults, but directly, only indirectly, but for other venues, that sort of dialogue with communities and with audiences, I think, is just really, really important. We also run a number of other engagement projects which don't necessarily happen in our building. These usually come about when we get a bit of extra funding. So we have run some projects with children who are seeking asylum. That's been ongoing for a number of years. We also have done intergenerational community projects, and we also have a project that runs as part of one of our music festivals every year, where, ideally an international musician will come and work with local children, and it's a kind of a form of culture exchange. They compose and devise a music project together, which is presented as part of the festival. So it's also about kind of respecting both the artists and the children and putting them kind of on the same platform as everything else in a programmed season in the ARC. So that's also a very important aspect of things for us. And we are obviously a publicly funded organisation. We are funded largely by the Irish Arts Council, and to a lesser degree, but still significant, by the Department of Education, because of the fact that we're working with children. And schools are and teachers are such a big part of what we do. Obviously, as a publicly funded organisation, it's really, really important to us that diversity and inclusion are kind of at the heart of what we do. So a lot of this is about, I suppose, ongoing development of our own awareness as we are programming, and I do think having that dialogue with various aspects of our audience is really helpful to keep us honest in that regard too. We also feel quite strongly that because of our unusual position, we are the only dedicated organisation in Ireland that we know of, that is dedicated to work with children. And so we feel we have a role to advocate for that. The ARC was actually created, at least in part, it was inspired by the fact that the Irish government in 1992 had signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there's 2 articles in that convention in particular that relate to arts and culture, and which basically enshrine the right of the child, all children, to engage with cultural life. And children as citizens, I suppose, is kind of at the heart of I suppose the vision and the ideals behind the creation of the ARC from the get-go, from when it started in 1995. So that is kind of like our North Star, it's a guiding principle that's really helpful for us. And it keeps that sort of child-centered and inclusive approach at the heart of what we do, that all children are entitled to this as we see it. And that is our job, to deliver programs that children as citizens, can engage with cultural experiences that are of as high a quality as what you would expect as an adult, and that is their right, actually, and that it is our job to kind of deliver on that right. So the ARC really was, I suppose, one of the actions that government took around, I suppose, making good on their promises when they signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So that's always there for us, and that advocacy role is really important. We work hugely in partnership with other organisations. And through that work, we hope to have obviously great partnerships, and it helps us reach broader audiences. It helps us engage with new artists as well, which is always very exciting. And to introduce artists who may not have worked with children before to the idea of doing this kind of work and helping them to nurture those skills. But also through those partnerships, we hope to influence our colleagues and, help them to see that, this kind of work with young people can actually be extremely valuable. And it helps them to reach new audiences and to maybe broaden their thinking and their artistic approach maybe in different ways as well. So it's really about dialogue, I suppose, and and trying to use our position to influence in the broadest possible way to influence society, so that in general, children are I suppose seen and heard a bit more and included more in artistic life in a way that's kind of taken seriously, rather than I suppose the older attitudes maybe, or when people don't necessarily think of work for children as artistically serious, which is one of our big missions, is to try and get that across, that in fact it is brilliant fun to work with children, and it also artistically can be a really exciting place to be for artists and for audiences. So yeah, so that's probably enough from me, I think. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Yeah, let's talk. I think to start, I want to start with what you say, Pauline, with specific details of people, because I think we have that in France, but more as an evaluation, or like a social impact evaluation, and I want to discuss about that. Maybe. Clotilde, how do you evaluate all the projects? Maybe there is a difference between the charter and the.
I think that now, like in the urban policies, the targets are very specific, and the files you have to fill in are very. Hard to do. I know that from the artists or the equipment that does it. So it's also very specific, and it's not to target a larger audience, but to be on a better approach on the of the people. And so for the assessment that we have, for instance, for the call of projects. Every company will write us a report of the action, and we can also we are also invited to see what they do actually in workshops, on their performances, and we see what it does to the people and their entourage and their families and their friends, and what it makes on the territory. So this is more about quality of what is going on in this group, in this project, than quantity. And it's not those kind of projects have not the purpose to that the people come to institutions. Maybe they will do, or maybe the project will help them to do that. But it's also that they feel that they are part of a community, that they are a real citizen, that they can speak about who they are, what they are in, well, what their way of thinking the world. And it's also this kind of sharing that we want to encourage.
Okay, maybe Pauline, you can talk more about this kind of evaluation, because you talk about how you have to fill some details to have grants, but after that, do you have a big part of evaluation of this project?
Yeah, of course. Any funding is linked to a full assessment at the end of the project, which include as well, the mostly like how different your project has been in the end compared to what you were applying for in the beginning. And I think and I think most organizations were like that. Most organization, as Clotilde said before with the funding in Lyon, you can't really apply with just one organization to fund 100% of your project. You usually have to match fund and get some different source of funding from different partners. So usually the assessment and the evaluation process is a shared dialogue and a conversation between you and your partners. And I know that we always try to get our partners involved, like come to the events and or the project, and have meetings afterwards to have their feedback on what's been done and on the project. So it can be like represented from the local council, from other cultural organization based in the borough, from some of our staff member, of course, musicians and artists involved in the project. And we also do a lot of surveys with participants usually when we do, especially in free public events. We usually try to engage with the audience on the day and try to have a little bit of conversation about their impression and their feedback on the event.
Okay. I want to talk about a bit of public restitution, maybe. Marie, you talked the importance of your children projects when the children have to go on stage. It's the aim goal. Is it the more important goal of the project?
For that particular project, which is the Generation Ladywood, where it involves 300 different primary school children and secondary school children, the end game is that performance. But in a way, also that's the start of the relationship too. So the music making throughout the project is really essential in a kind of introduction to improvisation and to these particular musicians and us. But then beyond the big flash performance, it's also about continuing that engagement with those participants in our other projects. So we're lucky to have those sort of integrations between our various projects, so we can try and introduce those children to a certain thing that has the support of schools, but then hopefully then those parents and families and young people then engage in our work on Saturdays, which is obviously needs a bit more of a kind of they have to take ownership of then being able to get to Symphony Hall and participate in those sessions as well. So it's a constantly evolving process, because obviously we want those communities and those different young people to engage, and it not always be not be any barriers for that to happen. So we're continually trying to finesse that relationship and either work in schools throughout the year. We'd like to do with pop-up performances, work in different community settings, and also, as other people have said, work with other organisations that have that closer link to particular areas of Birmingham where we'd like to get involved. Those people, it's always the key people, like key teachers, key musicians, community leaders, that as a large organisation that we have that responsibility to make sure that we are communicating with genuinely, and a deep investment across, number of years to enable that. And often those measurables that you want to happen won't happen for 10, 15 years. You have some success stories of particular musicians that have continued and are now enriching the cultural fabric of the city, but that takes years. So in terms of assessment, there's short-term assessment and evaluation and feedback from all parties involved, but then there's opportunity for much more extensive evaluation on a kind of citywide scale, which would be a wonderful thing to happen. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
Aislinn, maybe you want to complete that with the importance to go on stage for children.
Yeah, that was very interesting. I mean, I agree with Mary. The long-term evaluation is such an important piece. It's something we've struggled to get funding to do, but we would love to do, because it is a long game. You know, I mean, this sort of deep change or deep impact doesn't happen overnight, and it is about relationships and developing things over time, over a long time. You know, in our case, we're dealing largely with childhood. You know, so we want to try and engage with a child, hopefully from the ages of 2 to 12. You know, so for 10 years, that would be the ideal. If we could do that with every child we engage with, it would be amazing. However, so to the point about performance, I mean, I think, yes, it's something that comes up a lot, isn't it, in these kind of work where you're working more with communities. And naturally, there's a natural fear of performance. And, you know, even this morning, I'm feeling a bit nervous here talking online. So I think that's a human thing that everybody feels to some degree. But at the end of the day, I would sort of argue that music is a performance art. And if you don't let people have the opportunity to perform, you're not trusting them, and you're not really letting them fully experience all aspects of the art form. So it is a balance. I would say that performance is part of the process. It's not the entire point. And I think that's where people do get worried about it, you know, that it becomes too much of a focus on the performance, and that the richness of the process is undervalued or lost, or it's just not maybe nurtured in the same way because it's, you know, too much of a focus on the performance. But I mean, process is hugely important to us. Participatory work, you know, dialogue with children, doing things together, making art together, making music together is really important. The voice of the child, both literally in terms of their singing voice, but also in terms of who they are and what they've got to say and what they think about things. That is hugely important, especially in our participatory programs. But also, even just to say as well, in terms of, like, we do obviously commission a lot of performance work, which we then produce. And obviously that is working with professional musicians and about making a performance that goes on stage. But we still include children in that process. So it's still a huge process there. And we more or less insist that artists have to engage in dialogue with children in the process of making their shows. So they might do some workshops at a very early stage, and just a bit like I do with the programming, you know, and say, oh, the ARC has asked me to make a show for children, and I had these ideas, and what do you think? You know, your children, what do you think of it? So it could be, you know, or they might try out some songs or some music that they've written and say, you know, what do you think of that? And one thing with children is you get a really honest reply, so it's quite useful. You know, and we've had children inspire very particular moments in music shows that we've created. So I suppose for us, it's always about process, really, and it's about how do you make that process meaningful and collaborative, so that no matter what the outcome is, even if it is children on stage performing or not, you know, it could be a different kind of outcome, or if it's a professional artist on stage performing, but that along the way, there's a process that there's been a lot of thought and integrity about, and that it's very connected to the audience at all stages. I suppose that's the ideal, anyway.
Thank you. Maybe Sarah, you can complete with what about the process in Citizen.
To go on stage, the process to go on stage, or not. Usually, it's something that is really asked by the people we work with, because it's an opportunity, and especially when we work with children or young adults, because it's an opportunity to their family to come also to see them on stage, and it's also an opportunity to see what they have accomplished during the workshops. sometimes it's really difficult to create a performance because for some workshops it's not the goal that we aimed. For example, we have something in the Célestin that is called how I put it in English, I think it's a reading committee. So you read a theater piece, theater masterpiece, a contemporary piece, and you learn how to read theater, how to how to imagine theater, what can it become on stage, but the goal is not to perform the piece. So it was before with a final performance, but we are thinking about how we can valorize this kind of workshop without coming to the performance. And also, when we do workshops and they have a performance, it's, as we say, also a goal for people that don't usually come in a theater or in a venue to see how it is and how we attend the show, because there are also expectations in a performance for coming from the audience, and it's not the same to go to a concert and a theater performance.
Okay, just about your reading workshop, it's like it's open to everyone, or it's focused with schools or which kind of people?
It's open to everyone. It was a workshop we did. You have to have some backgrounds about writing and reading, but it was for young adults between 16 years old and 25 years old, but you don't have to be scholarized in some schools especially, or in some universities, but you have to be able to read a theater piece.
Okay. It was about being like a theater maker.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, it was with the Célestin director Claudia Stavisky. So how you imagine a piece, how you can create something from a piece.
Thank you. Clotilde, maybe do you want to conclude about these things of final points of the projects?
About assessments and
what?
Yes, well,
how do you finish a project?
Yeah, it's the same with the call for projects. We are more with projects where the process is important more than the end, and this is always there is always the question about the end, because we want also that the process or the art could continue. Even though the artists are not there anymore, for instance. So sometimes we like, that's why we like to have partnerships between social structures and institutions, because once the artist is not there anymore, then the social structure can go to a theater or a music institution, depending on what the project was about, for instance. And so it's more important, the different steps that are taken. And usually we are not just the financial collectivity. I mean, we give funds. Well, as you saw, it's not a big amount to the projects we support, but we are also part of them. So we are invited in the committee of usually those projects have a committee to go step by step, and we are invited in them. We meet the artists or the partners and the participants once a year or twice in the project. It depends, but we are also associated with how it's going on. So this is a sharing experience. So that's what I want to say. It's not just the financial and the institution on one side, and then the makers and the actors on the other side with participants and populations. It's a wall. But that's what we call the médiation culturelle in France, which is cultural mediation, which has no equivalent in Anglo-Saxon culture. Well, in Quebec, they have it now. So they say cultural mediation, and they try to define it so it could be understandable for everyone. And it's also about participatory activities, and also sometimes communities oriented or territories oriented, or more educational programs that you can have, but the form is not what is important. The important is more the goal and the environment in which or why those projects are done.
Yeah, thanks. Esling, I'm wondering, how do you start a project, and how do you meet school or teacher? Is the school know you and contact you and reach you, or is it you that you contact every schools in every area, or do you have specific areas you need and you have to go?
Are, I suppose, there's sort of many layers to how we work. So we would have programs running in our building usually, which any school can come to. So the teacher, we have a mailing list, marketing mailing list. Teachers sign up to that, and they get a notification when we have things available for schools to book. So that could be workshops. It might be an exhibition, it could be shows, all the kind of programming that we offer in our building. Most of it will have an aspect, sometimes some programs are largely focused towards schools' audiences, in fact. So that is completely open. I would say the open program for schools is largely attended by schools in the Dublin area, or within very easy reach of Dublin. So the counties that are, surrounding Dublin, there's good roads, and it's not necessarily all that far away. So that would be our main audience. From time to time, you might get a school coming from Cork, which is the other end of the country, on a special day trip or something to Dublin. But that's, a very small percentage. And then alongside that sort of, I suppose, wide open schools booking process, we also have the particular projects that we run with schools. So that depends. I mean, because we now have this very active engagement with this group of access schools, more and more, it tends to be that we would talk to one of those access schools around a particular project. We're also starting to develop bring more preschools into the access program as well. So at the moment, for example, we're working with 2 preschools on it's actually a visual art program, which we were able to do despite the pandemic. So we've a visual artist who's been commissioned to create 2 sculptures that will go and be installed in the preschools for a couple of months. And then the artist is going to do a lot of continuing professional development with the staff, so that they actually do the activities with children in the preschool, but it's inspired by the artwork, and there's lots of looking and responding. And so that's a very particular program that's happening in a preschool environment. And we approached the preschools in that case, but in the case of one of them, we have a long-standing relationship with them, so that made the process just much easier. because they know us and they trust us. And when we say we've got a project, they're more inclined to go, oh, yes, please, you know. Sometimes with schools that haven't worked with us before or haven't even attended an event in our building, you know, they just don't know who we are. So there's that sort of getting to know each other process, trying to show them that, you know, if they work with us, it's going to be a good experience. It's going to meet educational goals that are important to the teachers. You know, I think that's an important piece. There are, you know, all of the arts subjects are included in the curriculum for primary school in Ireland. But I think it's fair to say that some teachers are more comfortable with that than others. So, you know, there still is a bit of, you know, nervousness or lack of confidence amongst primary school teachers around different arts disciplines, which can also be a barrier for them even just bringing their class to something. So I think for really, you know, the long-term solution is around developing those relationships with teachers. However, teachers do move on as well. That's another challenge. Like they go to a different school, or in our case, if they leave Dublin, you know, if they go to a school in another county, you know, how do you keep up that relationship? Well, it's a bit tricky, but actually with the online stuff that we've all been doing now in the past, you know, 6-9 months, we have obviously found one of the advantages is to be able to connect with schools who are geographically further away from us. So we don't quite know yet what we're going to do with that possibility, but it does give us new options that we didn't really have before. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we will use a project if there's a particular school that for one reason or another have been difficult to engage with. You know, maybe they just are too busy, or, you know, the arts are maybe not such a priority for them for one reason or another. We may try and use, you know, try and engage them in a project as a way to develop a relationship with the hope that the project itself will be good quality and they'll all have a great time and they'll really see the value, and that from there you can start to engage with them further in other things, which could be attending something in our building or working with a different artist on a different project for a different age group or so on. But just really to try and begin a relationship as well. I think it can be quite a useful way of doing that too.
Thank you. Maybe to conclude and finish, Pauline, you can have the ask the same question about how do you create the project with the partner, because you said you always work a lot with partnership. I think it's the same here in France. We do that a lot, and maybe how you have the idea to create a specific Jamaican event, for example.
Yeah, well, I think it's a question of relationship, building up relationship with, you know, local partners that have a specific experience in a specific genre, or like with a specific type of audiences. So it's the same like when working with children, for instance. So the Vortex is not our main audience aren't children. So, but we have event for children from time to time, or workshop for children. But in that case, we'll work with, you know, educators or local organization that are working with children on a daily basis. Yeah, I'd say it's a mix. I mean, sometimes it could be that we discuss it internally inside the Vortex team, because we, you know, one member of the team will have met a specific person and had a conversation about an artist or a topic. For instance, if I was mentioning the 2 commissions that we had with the Renelle show. The beginning of the project was one of our team members at the Vortex who met with Renelle and started having a conversation about the whole celebration of Windrush Day in England, and the whole story about West Indies heritage and music, and try to find a platform for artists with this sharing this heritage and this historical background. to be like together and celebrate this historical background. So I'd say, yeah, it's a mix in between. Sometimes the idea might come directly from the Vortex and from the Vortex team, and we exchange in between us, and then we're wondering like, okay, who would be the best partner to work with on that particular case. And sometimes it's also organizations from the outside who come to us with a specific project because they think that it would be a right match, a right fit for the Vortex, and they're looking for a partner either to host the event or help out with the production of it. And so they will come to us and say, with a specific project, and then we'll see, how we can support them or, help with the realization. So I'd say, yeah, it's a mix. It always involves relationships that you've built with other people around, or like new people that you meet. And it's either like initiatives coming from the Vortex looking for who would be the best partner to help us achieve what we want to do, or sometimes people from the outside saying like, oh, Vortex could be the right partner for this project. This is what we want to do.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah. She said that you do that. Yeah, I do that. Everyone here, I think, do that. Thank you all. Thank you again, Telestans, to have we here. Do you have something to say before we say goodbye? Virtually.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Alice, for inviting me and taking part in this conversation. It's an honor to be with you all this morning, even virtually from London. Would have loved to be in Lyon with you all, but next time.
Yeah, hope so.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone.